Grand Rising, Grand Rising.
Grand Rising, y'all. Peace, y'all. Peace.
Grand Rising, everyone.
Everybody doing this rising.
Doing well, doing well. Can we be heard? Can everybody hear us? Guess that's the
One,
question.
two. One, two. Let me make sure. Check on. One, two, one, two. Yep, coming loud and clear.
Cool, cool.
Post this in the chat.
Got Joseph Brant pulled up.
And I just posted it in the chat. Dude with the never ending story.
Oh my gosh, this is not a joke.
Mm-mm.
That's right. You also have the actual picture that was sent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a way to show that picture?
Yeah. Let me I can send it to you and you can put it on sending him right now.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, thanks to Khan Indian X sent me the picture of Joseph Brant. Shout out to all the American Indians that's listening to us on Facebook, Every Rising, Messenger, how they checking into us, or that's taking the time out to reach out to let us know that they're out there listening. We appreciate it.
Most definitely.
Okay, yeah.
Waiting on the link to get to me. So where are we at in the
Joseph Brant
story?
story.
This guy has a lot going on.
Yes, he does.
Had a lot going on so far in his life where we're at. This is just.
I think we are after the war with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're after the war, and the paragraph I'm on is where it reads in 1790, after Americans attacked the Western Confederation in the Northwest India War.
Did we get that link posted already?
Yep, already in the chat.
All right, cool. I'm gonna go get it right now.
All right, 1790. For those looking, it's the one, two, three, four, five. What's that? Six. Six paragraph down
Uh,
from after the war.
After Americans attacked the Western Confederacy was your first sentence in 1790.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's where I was at.
Ha ha. Okay, sending you this picture now.
So no sound, you sound a little low.
Yeah, I'm on my Bluetooth. I will be switching to my.
Okay, okay. I just check and make sure it was nothing
Grand
wrong.
Rising, Michael Robinson.
Peace, Michael.
Mic closer to my mouth, but I'm not gonna fight with it.
Got it.
Thank you for saying that too, because I almost forgot. I was checking on this convenience right now, but I'm about to be inconvenienced with this cord.
Dun 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 dun.
I don't mind.
Yeah, sometimes as great as technology may be, sometimes it is not conducive when you're um, having to conduct business or you need to really make sure you have a connection.
Mm-hmm.
That is big facts.
Oh,
Mic check, mic check.
yeah, you sound a
One
lot
two
better.
one
You sound
two.
a lot
There
better
you
now.
go. Now you sound like no
Man,
sellout.
that's
Before you sounded
crazy.
like far far away sellout. I'm like, hold on.
far, far, far sellout versus no sellout.
Yep. Far sellout
But
versus
this,
no sellout. Yep.
Yeah, you no longer sound like stove sellout.
like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the stove. I'm in no
In the
stove.
freezer section at the stove. I
Sealed
just
tight.
in. Mm-hmm. Yesterday they had me like I was underwater, getting
Man.
rocks off the bottom.
Exactly.
Man. Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna need a new headset eventually.
That's how they do it. All right, I just sent you the picture, Joseph Brant, TMH. I just sent that one to you,
Alright.
and you can load it up if you wanted to show like the audience.
Mm-hmm.
On the same thing, you can just bring up another image thing
Mm-hmm.
and bring it into there, and it'll show on the screen. And you can, where you see the eyes, you can hit the eyes to black out the one that's showing now if you want the full screen just to be his picture. A lot of different things. But this dude, again,
He's responsible for so much.
Triple Agent Man. Triple.
He was the first 00 what? He can't be 007 what? He was just
Triple O. You Triple O.
Yeah.
Triple O.
He was the first or single O because he was the first one. So however you want to do it.
There you go. Yeah.
Single O, triple O. So
yeah.
I know dude
AKA.
was a problem.
So he thought he was doing all right. He thought every decision he made was gonna benefit or get him back on track with his people, but
I thought all along.
The backfire.
Backfire ain't the word.
The mini backfire. You need to shut the engine down now. Turn the key off.
I guess I'll start with this first paragraph, where it says, in 1790, after Americans attacked the Western Confederacy in the Northwest Indian War, sending General Joshua Harmon on a punitive expedition, member tribes asked Brant and the Six Nations to enter the war on their side. Brant refused. He instead asked Lord Dorchester, the new governor of Quebec for British assistance. Dorchester also refused, but later in 1794, he did provide the Indians with arms and provisions. After the defeat of General Joseph Harmon in 1790 at the hands of Little Turtle, the United States became interested in having Brant mediate as the war secretary. Henry Knox wrote several letters to Brant asking him to persuade Little Turtle of the Western Confederacy to lay down his arms. Harmon's defeat proved that the U.S. government, that the Indians of the Northwest were not conquered peoples, and it would require a war to bring them under U.S. authority. Brant extravagated his influences with the Western Confederacy in his attempts to in his letters to U.S. officials. Knowing if the Americans were courting him, then the British would likewise engage in gestures to keep his loyalty. Brant was attempting to revive the traditional play-off system in order to strengthen the position of his people. However, Brant knew that the British were not willing to go to war with the United States to save the Western Confederacy, and his position was not as strong as it seemed. It goes on, as a mediator, Brant suggested to the Americans that they cease white settlement in most of the lands west of the Ohio River, while advising the Western Confederacy to negotiate with America, saying that after Harmon's defeat, they held the upper hand, and now it's time to negotiate peace before the Americans brought more military forces into the old Northwest. Brant also advised the Americans to negotiate with Western Confederacy as a whole. Instead, with individual nations at the same time, use his talks with the Americans to impress upon the British that they needed to have respect for the First Nations land rights in Upper Canada. The people of Northwest had often had difficult relations with the Iroquois in the past and were primarily interested in enlisting Brant's aid as a way of bringing the British into the war on their side. In June 1791, Brant was publicly challenged by representatives of the Western Confederacy to take up the hatchet against Americans, and refusing, his influence, whatever it was on the Western Confederacy, ended forever. While Bryan had warned the Western Confederacy that they were fighting a war that they could not win, in November 1791, Little Turtle inflicted a crushing defeat on the American general Arthur St. Clair, which made Brant appear both cowardly and foolish. After St. Clair's defeat, Little Turtle sent Brant the scalper Richard Butler, one who had one of the U.S. Indians commissioners who negotiated the Treaty of Fort Stanwix, together with the message, "You, Chief Mohawk, what are you doing? Time was when you rose us to war and told us that if all the Indians would join with the king, they should be a happy people and become independent. In a very short time, you changed your voice and went to sleep and left us to lurch. It was widely noted in the Northwest that amongst the victorious warriors who defeated St. Clair were the Shawnee, Miami, Ottawa, Wyandots, Chippewas, Potawatomi, Cherokee, Mingos, and Lenape, but none were from the Six Nations." You hear that part there?
Mm-hmm.
It goes on where it says 1792. The American government invited Brant to Philadelphia, then the capital of the United States, where he met President George Washington and his cabinet. The Americans offered him a large pension and a reservation in upstate New York for the Mohawks to try to lure them back. Brant refused, but Pickering said that Brant did take some cash payments. George Washington told Henry Knox in 1794 to buy Captain Brant off at almost any price. Brant attempted a compromise peace settlement between the Western Confederacy and the Americans, but he failed. In 1793, Brant spoke at a council meeting of the Western Confederacy where he suggested they accept the American settlements north of the Ohio River while excluding white settlement to the rest of the land west of the Ohio River as the price of peace. Brant was outvoted, and the assembled chiefs announced that no white settlement west of the Ohio were the only peace terms they were willing to accept. The war continued, and the Indians were defeated in 1794 at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. The unity of the Western Confederacy was broken with the Peace Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The defeat of the Western Confederacy led to the Americans losing interest in Brant as a mediator, causing the collapse of his attempts to play the British off against Americans.
Okay, so
He tried to
try to put it middle against the ends. The ends against the middle. It didn't work. It said
got burnt.
It said the Confederacy was broken with Peace Treaty of Greenville. So let's see what that peace treaty entailed.
And grab it and post it in the chat.
Okay. Greenville, formerly titled Treaty with the Wyandots, etc., was a 1795 treaty between the United States and the Indians of the Northwest Territory, including the Wyandot and the Delaware, which redefined the boundary between Indian lands and the white man's lands in the Northwest Territory. It was signed at Fort Greenville, now Greenville, Ohio, on August 3rd, 1795, following the Native American loss at the Battle of Fallen Timbers a year earlier. It ended the Northwest Indian War in the Ohio County, limited Indian country to northwestern Ohio, and began the practice of annual payments following land concessions. The parties to the treaty were a coalition of Native American tribes known as the Western Confederation and the United States government represented by General Anthony Wayne and local frontiersmen. The treaty became synonymous with the end of the frontier in the Northwest Territory. The participants, General Mad Anthony Wayne, who led the victory to Fallen Timbers, led the American delegation. Other members included William Wells, William Henry Harrison, William Clark, Caleb Swan, and Meriwether Lewis. Native American leaders who signed the treaty included leaders of these bands and tribes: Wyandotte, Chief Tarhay, and Leatherlips. Wow. Delaware, several bands: Shawnee, Chief Blue Jacket. Then you have Ottawa, several bands. Chippewa, Potawatomi, 23 signatories, including Gomo, Siganok, Black Partridge, Topinabee, and Five Metals. Miami has several bands, including the Chief Little Turtle of the Miami, Illinois band, and We Kickapoo, and Kas Kaskaskia. So you see all these that go Indians that were part of this treaty. You have Tarhe and Leatherlips. So, so I think we need to look at who these individuals are. Dare we?
I hope they don't have no Joseph Brant type history.
Because if not, we in trouble. All right, so let's go with let's go with Tarhe.
Like, wow, seeing how all this fell apart.
Tarhe was the leader of the Wyandotte people in the Ohio County. His nickname was the Crane. He fought American expansion into the region until the Western Indian Confederation was defeated in the Battle of Fallen Timbers. In 1794, afterwards, he sought accommodation with the United States. They don't say too much about him.
You know, I'm gonna look for him later then.
Okay. So then we're gonna go next with Leatherlips. Come on, man. Leatherlips.
Out of all the names they could have chose for him.
Yeah, Leatherlips was a Wyandotte Native American leader of the late 18th and early 19th century. Leatherlips had three Wyandotte names. The one most often used was Shati Yaron, but he was sometimes referred to as the Te Yan Ayo. In later years, he was called Socha et Socha et Ease, which means long gray hair. He was of the Porcupine clan, as was his great friend Chief Tarhe, and he was related to Roundhead, Spitlog, and Batsy, Batiste, excuse me, noted
Hey.
Wyandotte warriors of that period. Wyandottes were decimated by disease and disastrous war with the five nations of the Iroquois, forced out of their homeland near Georgia Bay. They moved to the Ohio country. Leatherlips, an important leader, signed the Treaty of Greenville and encouraged cooperation with white settlers near the end of his life. That policy accommodated Europeans led to conflict with the movement led by the Shawnee brothers, uh, Tecmesh and Tenskwatawa, the prophet. Tens- Tenskwatawa reacted strongly against Leatherlips and condemned him to death for signing away native lands and for witchcraft. Okay. In 1810, Leatherlip's brother Roundhead, a fellow Wyandotte chief, ordered his execution. Whoa. Leatherlips was condemned to death by other natives for his desire to cooperate with white settlers. Not only was Leatherlips opposed by Tecmesh Confederacy against the United States, but he had also sold native land to William Henry Harrison. However, it is widely believed that Leatherlips was executed for exaggerated charges of witchcraft to draw attention away from the true political motives. While it is unknown if Roundhead took direct part in the execution of Leatherlips, he did head the council that called for his death. Dispatched by Roundhead, 6 Wyandottes traveled to what is now Dublin, Ohio, just north of Columbus, and announced the death sentence. Although white settlers, led by John Sells, pleaded for the old chief and attempted to bribe the death squad, the trial and sentencing were swift. After after clothing himself in his finest attire, Leatherlips, joined by his executioners, sang the death chant and prayed. Then he was killed by tomahawk. Oh my God! According to the book, This is Ohio by Grace Golder, the execution took place at the entrance to the caves that were now known as the Olentangy Indian Caverns, located north of Dublin, Ohio, and south of Delaware, Ohio. According to information from Olentangy, Indian caverns. The caverns were used by the Wyandot people up until 1810, the year of Letterlip's death, and also the first recorded incident of the European traveler entering the caves, as a shelter from the weather and a place to seclude themselves from another nearby tribe, the Delaware people. A monument to Leatherlips and a memorial art sculpture are tourist stops in Dublin, Ohio today. So this is the first time that we're hearing of a tribe actually calling for the death of a chief. This is crazy. And man, yeah, I'm at a loss. So these Indians call for the death of a chief because of them selling land. And it's pretty interesting that you figure after all these years of dealing with tribes and things like this would be the first recorded instance of
Mm-hmm.
Indians actually calling for the death of a chief. So think about it. He's a chief,
Uh-huh.
a well-respected chief,
Uh-huh.
and they call for his head.
Uh-huh. Ain't got it.
Dude, this is crazy because this is the first time. Again, I haven't been doing this that long, but this is the first time that I've ever heard of a tribe calling for a chief's head like that.
Execution
Yeah.
of Grand Rising, Rebecca listening to us this morning, Rebecca Williams.
Oh man, come on, man. This is another tangent.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Roundhead, who that was his brother.
Mm-hmm. But then you got to think, if they fighting for power and control, you can see the mechanisms on what sent everything to go downhill. Jockeying for position on who is going to be a better ally with this person or that person.
And this is Tecumseh's Confederation. So Confederacy. So who is a Tecumseh Confederacy? Oh boy. Just when we thought we was gonna be able to get through this, but it's needed.
Mm-hmm. All right, bring them two more front loaders in here. Let's go.
Tecumseh's Confederacy was a confederation of Native Americans in the Great Lakes region of the United States that began to form in early 19th century around the teaching of Tenskwatawa, the prophet. The confederation grew over several years and came to include several thousand warriors. Shawnee leader Tecumseh, the brother of the prophet, developed into the leader of the group as early as 1808. Together they worked to unite the various tribes against the American settlers coming across the Appalachian Mountains and onto their land. In November 1811, an American military force under the leadership of William Henry Harrison engaged warriors associated with Tenskwatawa in the Battle of Tippecanoe. I've heard of that battle.
Mm-hmm.
Under Tecumseh's leadership, the Confederation then went to war with the United States during Tecumseh's War and the War of 1812. However, the Confederation fell apart in 1813 following his death at the Battle of Thames. Wow. Okay, give me a second.
Mm-mm-mm.
I gotta regroup.
I was sitting here like, wow, how many levels is it to this?
And dude, there's so many trees. It's not even funny.
Mm-hmm. But then you can see these treaties was just contracts, and people kept bargaining and jockeying for position to have a better deal. I mean, a lot of people don't like it, but you have to be honest. The more and more you look at it, these are commerce deals going bad.
Yeah, that's exactly what it seems. Um, so the formation of all this is following the 1795 Treaty of Greenville. Native Americans in the Northwest Territory began to move out of the land ceded to the United States. Many of the natives, including the Lenape and the Shawnee, moved westward at the invitation of the Miami tribe to settle in land considered to be part of Miami holdings. The tribes intermingled one with the other, and most villages contained inhabitants of multiple tribes. The dominant Miami tribe inhabited much of modern central Indiana, and the Potawatomi tribe lived in the northern Indiana and Michigan. The Wee and Kickapoo, the Wea and Kickapoo, both related to the Miami tribe, and the Piankeshaw inhabited a series of villages in the western Indiana and eastern Illinois. The Piankeshaw later moved north, further integrating with the Wea and Kickapoo following the 1803 Treaty of Vincent, Vincennes. The Sauk, another powerful nation, lived in the northern Illinois to the west of the Miami. The Shawnee, who had lost most of their territory during the Northwest Indian War, moved into northwest Ohio and northeastern Indiana. The Lenape likewise had lost their territory and moved into south central Indiana. Remember the Lenape under um what's his name? Leone, was it Neil Leon?
Yeah, I think so. I have to go back and look it up.
Yeah, he was in that movement about uh the, the Pan Indian movement.
Yeah. Yes, before everybody was hollering Pan African, it was Pan Indian.
Tell me about it. So, okay. Since the Lenape likewise had lost their territory and moved into south central Indiana. Other tribes, including the Wyandotte Fox tribe, Winnebago, Odawa, Mingo, Seneca, and others, had a presence in the region's villages. Leadership was organized at the village level and not tribal level. So, in most cases, a leader represented members of multiple tribes who were living together in the same settlement. Leadership in the villages was likewise divided between war chiefs and civil chiefs. The civil chiefs negotiated the treaties and maintained outside relations, while the war chiefs took power in times of conflict. As the war chiefs, like Little Turtle, were removed from power following the war, the large confederacy of villages in the region began to fade, and the civil chiefs urged the native populations to work with the United States to maintain peace. So
Hmm.
basically, when there was no fighting, the war chiefs basically stepped down and handed it over to the civil chiefs.
Hmm. So, but if you wanted to keep control and be able to negotiate with people that's really not their skill set, when you do what America does now, keep you at war,
Hmm.
so you can deal with the representatives that you want to deal with.
Basically.
Hmm.
All right, man. So okay, so I got to read this part because this talks about the religious revival, and this goes back into Neolin and their um their disdain for the Europeans. It says in May 1805, Lenape chief Buckingahelas, one of the most important native leaders in the region, died of either smallpox or influenza. The surrounding villagers believed his death was caused by a form of witchcraft, and a witch hunt ensued, leading to the death of several suspected Lenape witches. The witch hunts inspired a nativist religious revival by Tecumseh's brother Tenskwata, Tenskwata, one who emerged in 1805 as a leader among the witch hunters. His early popularity was fueled by the support of Blue Jacket, a prominent Shawnee war chief. The prophet's growing influence quickly posed a threat to the influence of the accommodationist chiefs to whom Buckingham had belonged. The suspected witches included a Christian missionary who had been living among the Lenape and were well tortured. And hold on, among the Lenape, and all were tortured. One of the victims was partially burnt by fire, forcing him to confess to sorcery and to name his supposed co-conspirators.
Man, could it be that he was on fire, wanted somebody to put him out? So he admitted to anything to get some water put on him? I'm just saying.
Yeah, I would say so. Tenskwatawa was influenced greatly by the teachings of Neolin and Scatamek, Lenape religious leaders who died years earlier and who had predicted a coming apocalypse in which the white man would be overthrown by supernatural powers. As part of Tenskwatawa's religious teachings, he urged Indians to reject the ways of the whites like liquor, Europeans, styling clothing, and firearms. He also called for the tribes to refrain from ceding any more lands to the United States. Numerous Indians who were inclined to cooperate with the United States were accused of witchcraft, and some were executed by followers of Tenskwatawa. Black Hoof was accused in the witch hunt but was not harmed. From his village in Greenville, Tenskwatawa compromised Black Hoof's friendly relationship with the United States, leading to rising tensions with the settlers in the region. He attracted a large number of followers, mostly Shawnee, but some of his early followers were also Wyandotte, Mingo, and Ottawas. Blackhoof and other tribal leaders began to put pressure on Tenskwatawa and his followers to leave the area to prevent the situation from escalating on to an open conflict. They were invited to the northwest Indiana by Potawatomi chief Winnemac, who was also a religious leader, calling for a return to many of the old ways. Although he sought access to American agriculture technology. Tisquatawa accepted the invitation and established the village of Prophetstown near the confluence of the Wabash and Tippecanoe rivers and claimed by Miami. Little Turtle told the Shawnee that they were unwelcome there, but the warnings were ignored. Tenskwatawa's religious teachings became increasingly militant following an 1807 treaty between the Americans, Fox Tribe, and Sauk. Many members of the two tribes were outraged by the treaty, which caused the Sauk to lose their greatest settlement. Many of the dissatisfied came to align themselves with the prophet and his teachings. The Piankeshaw and Kickapoo had also been adversely affected by the treaties and migrated closer to Prophetstown. His growing popularity attracted Native American followers from many different tribes, including Shawnee, Chickamauga, Ojibwa, Chippewa, Muscatan, and Potawatomi. Willing, 1997, argues that Tippecanoe was not only the largest Native American community in the Great Lakes region, but served as a major center of Indian culture and final rampart defense against the whites. It was an intertribal religious stronghold along the Wabash River in Indiana for 3,000 Native Americans. Tippecanoe, known as Prophetstown to whites, served as a temporary barrier to settlers' westward movement led by Tenskwatawa and Tecumseh. Thousands of Algonquin-speaking Indians gathered at Tippecanoe to gain spiritual strength. U.S. government attempts from the George Washington to William Henry Harrison administration to rid the area of the numerous Indian tribes eventually met with success as the Indians retreated westward by 1840 to avoid a large number of whites entering their territory. Now, you listen to this. Peace, Golden Moon. Wow, rise of Tecumseh. By 1808, Tecumseh began to be seen as a leader by his community. He was outraged by the continued loss of land to the Americans, and he began to travel around the southern Great Lakes region to visit village leaders and urge them to stop cooperating with the Americans and threatening to kill chiefs who continued to work with the Americans. Tecumseh had possibly as many as 5,000 warriors at his disposal scattered across the Northwest. In late 1808, the British in Canada approached him to form an alliance, but he refused. It was not until 1810 that Americans first took notice of him. Tecumseh eventually emerged as a leader of the Confederation, but it was built upon a foundation established by religious appeals to his younger brother. Quickly becoming the dominant Native American leader in the Northwest, United States, Tecumseh turned his attention to the South. In 1811, he traveled to meet the leaders of the five civilized tribes in the hope of uniting with him in confederation in the North. With their help, he believed they would be powerful enough to defy the Americans, who would be forced to fight against them across the entire 1,000-mile wide frontier. He was met with resistance and rejection, and only a fraction of the Creeks accepted his call to arms, leading leading to the later Creek War. So I'm gonna go ahead and read Tecumseh's War because this is interesting because this is one of the first times where we start to see that there are actually tribes that are trying to mount an offensive against the tribes that are siding with the Europeans, in this case the United States. Tensions had already been rising rapidly as people became aware of Tecumseh's war aims. While he was still in the South, he presumptively struck. Hold on. While still in the South, a preemptive strike was launched against Prophetstown, defeating his brother and a force of 500, 700 warriors in the Battle of Tippecanoe. The defeat was a terrible blow for the Confederacy, which never fully recovered. Tecumseh returned and began to rebuild the Confederacy, allying with the British and Canada at the outbreak of the War of 1812. Tecumseh now had a supply of rifles, bullets, and gunpowder. Tecumseh began a series of coordinated raids attacking American posts in areas the British had ceded to the U.S. The Americans responded quickly and launched a second campaign, destroying Prophetstown a second time. The American frontiersmen had a grievance that motivated their demand for war in 1812. Overall, Tecumseh's Confederacy played a crucial role in causing the War of 1812, and in early operations in the West in 1812, Tecumseh's warriors, as, as shock troops, assisted a small force of 700 British regulars and Canadian militia to force the surrender of 2,500 American soldiers by threatening to massacre any captives of the siege of Detroit. General William Hull surrendered Fort Detroit in August of 1812 without a fight. Tecumseh's frontier war forced the Americans into regard action, which divided their forces and prevented them from concentrating large enough numbers to successfully invade and occupy the strategically important area of Lower Canada, which is now Quebec. In 1813, the U.S. Navy gained control of Lake Erie. The British and Tecumseh abandoned Detroit and fled east, where they were caught and destroyed as a military force. Tecumseh was killed in the Battle of the Thames near Chatham, Ontario. The small retreating British force rapidly routed, leaving Tecumseh's 500 warriors who refused to retreat further to face significantly superior American force, which included cavalry. The death of Tecumseh had a demoralizing effect on his allies, and his Confederacy dissolved as an organized entity. Soon after, although many tribes continued to fight under their own leaders, as they had before Tecumseh's death. So Tecumseh had reached out to the Five Nations, and he believed that if they had joined, I'm just paraphrasing here, the Five Nations, then the United States would have been forced to fight all along the north and southeast, which would basically have spread them thin, and they could have pretty much kicked the United States out of here. But the Five Nations decided not to. So there were numerous attempts by tribes, it seemed like, up until the 1812 war, to get the Europeans or the United States up out of here. That's crazy. So the war of Tippecanoe, I remember hearing about that in history class.
I'm back. I had to set up. You got a 20-man fan base listening to you. I had to set up for. And we can't hear now on this end. Can we sit in your other room? Next person not. Next person not. So I'm back.
Okay. So Tecumseh was heavy into fighting against the United States and giving up land, but he was eventually forced to side with Britain, and eventually they got whacked. But here's a funny thing, because this is the first time I'm hearing, or we're hearing of tribes actually trying to get together to fight overall. And had he been able to, him being Tecumseh, had he been able to join with the Five Nations, that would have been a mighty force, and they would have spread the U.S. thin. And then they would eventually have to face France, Spain, and Britain. So, but I think it had that happened, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. That's just my personal opinion.
And I believe that's why you had people creating stories, blowing up the stories, blowing them out of proportion to cause jealousy among other tribes, to stop the unity. Because it's like we hear a lot of stories about that, how they'll tell you they're giving this person that, this and this and this, so the next tribe or chief will try to make a deal so they can get the same thing.
Right. So that was so who are we talking about, man?
Grand Rising, Golden Moon.
I know I lost my spot because I was looking at the chiefs
Yeah,
that were.
yeah, it was the Greenville Treaty and the Chiefs that was part of the peace treaty.
Let me go back. Oh yeah, Greenville Treaty.
That Tari.
So we already read about Tari. We read about Leather Lips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Chief Blue Jacket. Who was Chief Blue Jacket?
Okay, finna post him in the chat for everybody who wanna have the information to read along with it.
And it's important to understand who these chiefs were because for the most part, it seems we hear about tribes and we never really hear that much in depth detail about who the chiefs were and what their role was. And I think this is vitally important. So we try to go deep as possible. We'll try to get you as much information as possible. So Blue Jacket, oh, Weapis Sinwa. So Blue Jacket of Weapis Sinwa was his name. It said was a war chief of the Shawnee people, known for his militant defense of Shawnee lands in the Ohio country. Perhaps the preeminent American Indian leader in the Northwest Indian War, in which a pan-tribal confederacy fought several battles with the nascent United States. He was an important predecessor of the famous Shawnee leader Tecumseh. Okay, so he came before Tecumseh. Okay, early life.
Mm.
Little is known of Blue Jacket's early life. He first appears in written historical records in 1773 when he was already a grown man and a war chief. In that year, a British missionary visited the Shawnee villages of Scioto River and recorded the location of Blue Jacket's town or Deer Creek, present day Ross County, Ohio.
Mm.
So Blue Jackets participated in Dunmore's War and the American Revolutionary War, allied with the British, always attempted to maintain Shawnee land rights. With the British defeat in the American Revolutionary War, the Shawnee lost valuable assistance in defeating the Ohio County. That struggle continued as white settlers in Ohio escalated, and Blue Jacket was a prominent leader of the resistance. On November 3rd, 1791, the Army of the Confederation of Indian Tribes, led by Blue Jacket and Miami Chief Little Turtle, defeated an American expedition led by Arthur St. Clair, governor of the Northwest Territory. The engagement, known as the Battle of the Wabash or St. Clair's defeat, was the crowning achievement of Blue Jacket's military career and the most severe defeat ever inflicted upon the United States of by Native Americans. That's the reason why we don't hear too much about it. Traditional accounts of the battle tend to give most of the credit for the victory to Little Turtle. John Sugden argues that Little Turtle's prominence is due in large measure to Little Turtle's self-promotion in later years. The story got bigger and bolder, and his responsibility was a bigger part as the story continues to be told. Right, Blue Jacket's triumph was short-lived. The Americans were alarmed by St. Clair's disaster and raised a new professional army commanded by General Anthony Wayne on August 20th, 1794. Blue Jacket's Confederate army clashed with Wayne at the Battle of Fallen Timbers just south of present-day Toledo, Ohio. Blue Jacket's army was defeated and he was compelled to sign the Treaty of Greenville on August 3rd, 1795, ceding much of present-day Ohio to the United States. Wow. In 1805, Blue Jacket also signed the Treaty of Fort Industry, relinquishing even more of Ohio. In Blue Jacket's final years, he saw the rise to prominence of Tecumseh, who would take up the banner and make the final attempt to reclaim Shawnee lands in Ohio County. That's crazy. Grand Rising, Copper Color Queen.
Peace, Copper Colored Queen, peace.
Okay, so it says in 1877, decades after Blue Jacket's death, a story was published which claimed that Blue Jacket had eventually been a white man named Marmaduke Van Swearingen, who had been
What?
captured and adopted by the Shawnees in 1770 around the time of American Revolutionary War. This was a popularized in his historical novels written by Alan E. Eckert in the late 1960s, an outdoor drama based on Van Swearingen's story Blue Jacket, White Shawnee War Chief, was performed in Xenia, Ohio, beginning in 1981. Performances of the play ended in 2007. Beginning with historian Helen Hornbeck Tanner in 1978, a number of historians have argued that Blue Jacket and Van Swearinger were not likely to be the same person. The historical record indicates that Blue Jacket was much older than Marmaduke Van Swearingen and was already an established chief by the time Van Swearingen was supposedly captured. Furthermore, no one who personally knew Blue Jacket later left any records referring to him as a white man. According to Blue Jacket biographer John Sugden, Blue Jacket was undoubtedly a Shawnee by birth. See, this is another example of how they attempt to quote unquote air quotes whitewash individuals.
Yeah.
Then says DNA testing of the descendants of Blue Jacket and Von Swearingen was given additional support to the argument that Blue Jacket was not Von Swearingen. After an initial test in 2000, results of a DNA test using updated equipment and techniques was published in September 2006 edition of the Ohio Journal of Science. The researchers tested DNA samples from the men descended from Charles Swearingen, Marmaduke's brother, and six who were descended from the Blue Jacket's son, George Blue Jacket. The DNA from the two families did not match, and so the study concluded that, barring any questions of paternity of Chief's single son who lived to produce male heirs, the Blue Jacket with Caucasian roots is not based in reality. So that means these people were trying to take on um Blue
Family
Jacket's
identity.
family identity. So much that they was willing to lie and create plays from it. Are y'all hearing
Mm-hmm.
this?
Mm-hmm. So now this is the question. How many of these tribes this was done to? This one was unsuccessful, but how many are successful at replacing the whole family and taking the family's place?
I don't know. So that was Blue Jacket, and then so you got the Chippewa, the Potawatomi. Um, I'm trying to look for some other chiefs. Let's look at Chief Little Turtle.
Yeah, you got Little Turtle, you got Jumo.
Jumo, where Jumo?
Whereas on the Dream on Treaty of Greenville, where it said the participants,
Yeah.
Native American leaders. Then after the Delaware, the third line it says 23 signatories, including Jumo. He was Chief Jumo was a 19th century Patamoan chieftain. He and his brother, what's that, Sinchawan, were among the more prominent war chiefs to fight alongside Black Partridge during the Peoria War.
Now, what'd you click on?
On the Treaty of Greenville, will it say participants?
Yeah, I'm at participants. Yeah.
Then the second paragraph say Native Americans leaders who signed the treaty included leaders of these bands, Wyandots.
Mm-hmm.
Second line starts leather lips, and third line would say 23 signatories, including Jumo.
Oh, right. Okay.
These are all people.
Oh, good grief.
The five metals first appeared in Eastern. Yeah, we'll go through one by one. We doing Jumo first?
Yeah.
All right, let me post him in the. I'm like, oh. It's a lot. It's a whole lot.
All right, so Chief, I'm gonna call him Gomo.
Gomo.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him Gomo. Well, Gamo.
Gomo.
He's a Potawatomi or Masino. Was a 19th century Potawatomi chieftain. He and his brother Sinak
Sinachawan.
were among the more prominent war chiefs to fight alongside Black Partridge during the Peoria War. Gamo is first recorded as a chieftain living on the Illinois River, his village being located 25 miles above present-day Peoria, Illinois. In 1809, he was one of the several chieftains visited by Joseph Trotter, who brought assurances of peace and friendship from I'm sorry, from
I'm
Venus
just like
Edwards,
you.
territorial government of Illinois. He and other Potawatomi chieftains were approached by Tecumseh and the Shawnee during Tecumseh's war. However, he was one of several chieftains who wished to remain neutral during the conflict. You go trying to be neutral.
There we go again. That neutrality.
In July 1811, Gamo spoke with the U.S. Indian agent Thomas Forsyth on behalf of Missouri Territorial Governor William Clark, requesting he surrender the Potawatomi responsible for the Gasconade murders, which had occurred earlier that year. He denied his own band's involvement and sympathized with Clark, instead casting suspicion towards Tecumseh's brother, the Prophet. However, he replied that he did not have the power to enforce his sole will against so many. He also informed Clark of the whereabouts of Maine Pock, who was staying in Detroit for the fall, along with 120 of his warriors. Maine Pock was preparing for hostilities the moment Great Britain and the United States went to war. After Potawatomi responsible were located on Shoal Creek, Captain Su- Captain man Captain Samuel Levering proceeded to Gamo's village with 50 men, intending to deliver a letter from Clark. He sent a French trader to inform Gamo of his arrival. However, an Indian had arrived ahead of the Frenchman and reported to Gamo of the soldiers approaching the village. He later sent a message to Levering that he would not meet with him without an escort of 14 warriors. On August 5th, he and an American flag flown from his village and allowed Levering to enter as receive the letter from Clark. He told Levering that he was willing to cooperate with Clark, at least to the best of his ability, and called counsel of the local chieftains. Levering left some tobacco as a gift for the council while they visited other villages upriver. Gamo encouraged the chieftains to attend and hear the address of the governor for themselves so that he would not be accused of treachery or being a sugar mouth. Wow. So see, they already knew that the Europeans were notorious for spreading lies.
Yep.
That's why
So
he wanted other people to be there, so there would be no he said, she said.
accountability, accountability. Sugar mouth. He say, she say. Gossip.
Held on the morning of August 16th, the Potawatomi discussed the escalating violence and horse stealing against the settlers. The council refused to turn over the perpetrators, although they eventually agreed to return the horses. Little Chief returned 2 horses to Captain Nathan held at Fort Dearborn, while Gamo promised to return the rest. The murderers of Cole's party were also found in a village 20 miles west of Tippecanoe. Although denying his band's involvement, he feared he might be coerced into ceding Potawatomi lands and avoided meeting with Governor Ninian Edwards the following year to discuss the issue further. In April 1812, he finally agreed to the conference with Governor Edwards and Cahokia, which included Tenachewan, his brother Comas, and Black Partridge, as well as 18 other minor chiefs and warriors. During the conference, Edwards warned the Gamo and others of the British ambitions in the region. Although he assured the Potawatomi that the United States government had no intentions of forcing the Potawatomi from their lands, Gamo and the others were reluctant to accede their request. During the War of 1812, his village was one of a number of Potawatomi settlements destroyed during an expedition by Illinois Rangers. Under orders from Governor Edwards, who made that promise, a detachment of Illinois Rangers set fire to every major Potawatomi settlement of the Illinois River between Edwardsville and Quincy, Illinois. During the draining of Peoria, he and 2 other warriors provided food and shelter for the women and children escaping from the village and gave them back canoes to travel upriver to Cahokia. A later participant in the Peoria War, he and 12 other chieftains, including Sachewan, Chick, Shack,
Shack.
Comas, Crow, and Black
Bro.
Partridge, were escorted to St. Louis, Missouri by Colonel George Davenport to negotiate a peace treaty. He was one of the signatories when the treaty was successfully signed. Soon after arriving in St. Louis, Gamo was succeeded by his brother Sachewan following his death in 1815. So he died shortly after the 1812 war. Again, so we're starting to see firsthand
Mm-hmm.
how these Indian chiefs understood that the Europeans could not be trusted, but in some instances, because the tribes that were around them were trusting them, they pretty much didn't have much of a choice.
Yeah. Because they got to a point to where you had to pick a side to get allies. Because you see, at this time, tribes are picking. You got people picking British, French.
And at this time, the United States. And
Mm-hmm.
and, and what's so important to pay attention to is had the Five Nations sided with Tecumseh when he had over 5,000 Indians, they could have the
Ran everybody back.
yeah, they could have ran everybody east of the Mississippi out of the 13 colonies because they had the forces.
They had the numbers, the resources to do it.
But because the Five Nations were quote unquote in bed with the United States or with Canada, well, at this time they were South,
Mm-hmm.
so it would have been the United States.
Yep.
That's why it didn't happen. So, so whoever's, and this is not a knock if you're part of the Five Nations, because my tribe created one of the greatest atrocities. But I'm saying if you're part of the Five Nations, you got some explaining to do.
You don't keep reminding me. We keep reminding me.
Look,
Let me
man.
stop.
Look, man. I'm just telling it like it is, bro.
Yep. Yep.
Gotta keep it straight.
Yes, we do. That's the only way we're gonna get out of this. Be honest with the situation and ourselves, so that way it allows us to fix it.
Sigenaut. So who was he? Ah, man.
All right, getting his information to post up.
It doesn't have an article. It doesn't have an article with his exact name. Please search Sigenaut in Wikipedia to check. All right, let me click on this. It says the page for Sigenaut does not exist. You can ask for it to be created.
Yeah, I'll probably have to reach out to
Yeah.
one of the nations to see if we can get some info on them because they don't have none on Wikipedia or online about them. Just the Treaty of Greensville.
Yeah, shout out to the tribes and the nations that are actually listening.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is anything that we are incorrect on, please, please, please do not hesitate to give us a correction because we are definitely understanding that we are using Wikipedia
Mm-hmm.
and information that is basically third party. So we understand that some of this information is incorrect, which is the reason why we put the statement out that we gotta take the information for what it is, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely reaching out to any of the tribes that are listening to provide us with the factual information. So we definitely appreciate you for listening,
Mm-hmm.
and we just want to send our thanks and our gratitude.
Same here, and appreciate the info y'all do send us to help us to keep doing this. So thank you very much.
So Black Partridge, who was a chief, or Black Pheasant, he's a Potawatomi um, chief. It says, was a 19th century Peoria Lake Potawatomi chieftain. Although a participant in the Northwest Indian War and the War of 1812, he was a friend to early American settlers and an advocate for peaceful relations with the United States. He and his brother, well, Bonte, Wabonte, both attempted to protect settlers during the Battle of Fort Dearborn. Wow. After they were unsuccessful in preventing the attack. Oh, so they were pro-American. A memorial at the site of the massacre in present-day Chicago, Illinois once included a statue of Black Partridge preventing a tomahawk from hitting Mrs. Margaret Helm, the wife of one of the defenders of Fort Dearborn. Black Patriot Woods, a state park in Cook County, Illinois, as well as Partridge Township in Woodford County, Illinois, are also named in his honor. Black Partridge is first recorded during the Northwest Indian War as a war chief under Machakawis, Machakawis at the Battle of Fallen Timbers. He was later awarded a silver medal with an engraving of President George Washington from General Mad Anthony Wayne at the signing of the Treaty of Greenville. On August 3rd, 1795, another account claims the medal was presented to him by General William Henry Harrison at the Treaty of Fort Wayne. On September 30th, 1809, and had an engraving of President James Madison. He wore the medal for several years, awards to symbolize the Potawatomi's friendship with the American settlers. One of Potawatomi's chieftains, wishing to remain neutral during Tecumseh's war, he and Gamo refused to ally with Shawnee chieftain Tecumseh. When approached by him during the summer of 1810, Black Partridge said to Tecumseh, I cannot join you. This token was given to me at Greenville by the great Chief Wayne. On it, who see the face of our father at Washington. As long as this hangs on my neck, I can never raise my tomahawk against the whites. Although although he advocated peace, he could not prevent the younger tribal members and warriors from joining Tecumseh's fight. He unsuccessfully tried to dissuade the Potawatomi from joining the attack at Fort Dearborn, and on the evening of August 14, 1812, he rode ahead of the main forces arriving at Dearborn to return the medal to the fort commander, Captain Nathanhead. Father, I come to deliver up to you the medal I wear. It was given to me by the Americans, and I have long worn it in token of our mutual friendship. Our young men are resolved to imbue their hands in the blood of the whites. I cannot restrain them, and I will not wear a token of peace while I am compelled to act as an enemy. Good grief. During the ensuing battles of Fort Dearborn, he and his brother Wabansi tried to protect the settlers from the violence being carried out by the attackers. Black Partridge saved the life of Miss Margaret Helm, the wife of Lieutenant Leoni T. Helm, the stepdaughter of the Indian trader John Kinsey. By holding her under water under the appearance of drowning her in Lake Michigan, he later removed her to a nearby Indian camp where her wounds were dressed. Black Partridge also helped free her husband, who was being held captive by Redhead Chief in Kankakee, delivering the ransom on behalf of U.S. Indian agent Thomas Forsyth. He voluntarily offered his pony rifle and a gold ring along with original writing order for $100 signed by General George Rogers Clark. Returning to his village on Peoria Lake, however, he found his village had been burned by Illinois Rangers from Edwardsville under the orders of George Ninian Edwards. Among the massacred villages included his daughter and his grandchild, taking 200 warriors from the nearby village as well as 100 from Sequenebec and another 100 from Meritas. He joined in the attack against Fort Clark on September 19, 1813. Along this attack was repulsed by the fort defenders Blackhawk, then a young warrior who also present at the attack. Black Partridge and his band eventually surrendered after being driven back to Fort Clark by General Henry Dodge and Major Zachary Taylor. He was one of the 13 chieftains escorted by Colonel George Davenport to St. Louis, where peace was signed between the Potawatomi and the United States. He was a later signatory of several treaties between the Potawatomi and the United States government. So here's the thing that I find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He risked his life to save a couple of people and end up losing his
own family after saving their family. Yeah, they got the statue where he stepped in front of the other Indian with the tomahawk about to hit the woman, and he put his hand up in the way to block it. That's what the statue looks like.
So his daughter and grandchild were both killed.
Mm-hmm. But he saved their families, and they invaded his village after they promised that they wasn't gonna do anything. Sound familiar?
But you got these Indians that were believing that they were going to be safe because they were different. Top
We hear that. We hear that now, like, oh, they did that to them. They won't do me like that. Guess a lot of people gonna learn the hard way.
Tapinaby. Chief Tapinaby, he who sits quietly, born 1758, died 1826, was a Potawatomi tribe leader and a sign of very important treaties. He was born in his father's village on the St. Joseph River in 1758, next to his father's old chief, Nanaquiba. He he was also noted as one of the greatest Potawatomi chiefs of all time. He was documented as a great warrior and known for his great tactical decisions in many battles like his father. Before he died in 1826, he was known as the leader of the Potawatomi tribe of the Midwestern United States. He signed the Treaty of Greenville in 1795 that ceded much of what is now Ohio to the United States. He also signed 11 later treaties during his leadership. He was succeeded as a leader by the Potawatomi by Leopold Pakagan. Wait a minute. He was succeeded as a leader of the Potawatomi leader by Leopold Pokagon That doesn't sound like an Indian. Hold on, I'll read that in a second. Chief Tapanabi is son to hereditary Sakam chief of all Potawatomis, Anaquiba, and brother of Chief Chibas, biological grandfather of Chief Abram B. Burnett, now Weshba. He was a great warrior and highly respected and intelligent chief involved in battles and noted as war chief of Tecumseh during the Tecumseh Uprising. So who is this Leopold Pakagan who succeeded him?
What's funny is, after a while, the part I do know about him, I know a tribe took on his name after the Pakagon tribe is named after him.
Hmm.
They took on his name later on, but they were the Potomac, and they became the Pakagon. What this brand did.
Yeah, Leopold Pakagan was a Potawatomi
Let me grab this.
Wakama, taking over from Toppinby, who died in 1826. Pakagan became the head of the Potawatomi of the St. Joseph River Valley in Michigan, a band that later took his name. Pakagan's early life is surrounded by legend, and many details are known only in oral history of the tribe. Stories suggest that he was born in Ottawa or Ojibwe, but was raised from a young age by the Potawatomi. His name, Pakagan, Pokigan means the rib, but literally means something used to shield. As the ribs shield the heart, so did Pakagan shield his people. Interesting.
Pakagon converted to a Roman Catholic Church.
There we go. Pakagan emerged as a very successful tribal leader after 1825. In the last decade of his life, Pakagan sought to protect and promote the unique position of the Potawatomi communities living in the St. Joseph River Valley. He traveled to Detroit in July 1830, where he visited Father Gabriel Richard to request the services of a black robe, literally dressed in black, referring to the black robe, cassock, traditionally worn by priests. He believed that affiliation with the Catholic Church represented an important political alliance in the struggle to avoid removal. That same year, Pakagan and his wife Elizabeth were baptized by Father Frederick Reese, the Vicar General of the Detroit Diocese, along with numerous fellow band members. In August 1830, Father Stephen Badin arrived to establish a mission to serve the Pakagan Potawatomi. By converting to Catholicism, the Potawatomi of the St. Joseph Valley River affirmed a new identity as Pakagan Band of Potawatomi. In 1833, Pakagan negotiated an amendment to the Treaty of Chicago that allowed Pakagan's band to remain on the land of their ancestors in Michigan. Nearly all the rest of the Potawatomi were to be moved west of the Mississippi River by the federal government following the Interim Removal Act of 1830. By abstaining from alcohol at the treaty negotiations. Hold on, you listen, y'all.
This is going to get interesting, y'all.
By abstaining from alcohol at the treaty negotiations held in Chicago in 1833 and emphasizing his and his followers' conversions to Catholicism, Pakagan secured a special provision in the 1833 treaty. Later, the Pakagan band removed to Labre Crochet, land of the crooked tree, literally where the crooked tree is. Pakagan ultimately used the monies paid pursuant to the treaty to purchase lands for his people in Silver Creek Township near Dowagiac, Michigan. He patented the land in his name and became a private landowner, same as the surrounding settlers. The Catholic Potawatomi throughout southwest Michigan and southwest Indiana acknowledged Patagon as their leader. Ever since the Indian villages from Hartford, Rush Lake, Dowagiac, Niles, Buchanan, in Michigan, and South Bend in Indian have been united under a common identity, Pakagon. Why does that remind me of Pokemon?
You know, gotta catch them all.
In 1841, Pakagon obtained the assistance of Associate Michigan Supreme Court Justice Epaphroditus Ransom to halt U.S. military attempts to remove the Catholic Potawatomi in violation of the 1833 treaty. After Pakagan's death on July 8, 1841, disputes between his heirs and the Potawatomi and the Catholic Church over ownership of the Silver Creek lands resulted in legal battles that painfully disrupted the community. A majority of the residents living in Silver Creek moved to Bush Creek, Rush Lake, and elsewhere in southwest Michigan and northwest Indiana. The Potawatomi worked to secure the annuities and other promises owed them under the terms of the many treaties they had signed with the United States. Today, the tribe continues as the Patagon Band of Potawatomi Indians, a federally recognized Indian nation with an excess of 4,300 citizens and 10 county service area in northwest Indiana and northwest Michigan. Tribal headquarters are located in Wajiak, Michigan, with a satellite office in South Bend, Indiana. The tribal police force operates in substation in New Buffalo, Michigan, to cover the tribal-owned casino, Four Winds, New Buffalo.
You know what makes me think?
What's that?
What I'm gonna look up later on.
What's that?
How much percentage does the Catholic Church get off that land? Because when they was talking about they were fighting over ownership, where they said the Catholic Church had say so in it, family members had say so in it, and it don't go into detail on how it was worked out. So I'm wondering, is this another one of them tribes that these churches got their hand into and got the land? Because there's a couple of tribes that happened to where they converted to a particular belief system,
right?
And the churches in them. That's how a lot of them churches end up getting their hands on the land.
Yeah. So I'm going to 5 medals.
All right, let me post them up.
These tribes, these chiefs, love these medals that they were given by these Europeans.
These trinkets. I'm gonna post him in the chat. Grand Rising Pamela Hall, Golden Moon, Brittany Davis. Let's see if there's anybody else we must read. Okay. All right, I just posted 5 medals in the chat.
So 5 medals also recorded is Wanan Garcia or Wanan Garcia.
Wanan Garcia.
Wanan Garcia from the Potawatomi. Zonia. Yeah. 5 coin or 5 medal. First appeared in Eastern records after the Battle of Fallen Timbers. Like I said, please, for those tribes and nations that are listening, please send us a proper pronunciation of this because I don't want to be disrespecting the tribes. It says he was a leader of the Elkhart River Potawatomi. He disappears from the record shortly after the end of the War of 1812. 5 medals led his people in defense of their homelands and then led his people into the new world of agriculture. Peace on the frontier. In November 1794, long after the Battle of Fallen Timbers, the Potawatomi turned to Americans for and into the war. 5 medals led a delegation to Fort Wayne and arranged to discuss peace at Greenville the following January. The armistice was concluded in January, and in June, peace council was arranged also in Greenville. In 1796, the Americans were concerned over the continued contract between the Potawatomi along the St. Joseph River. To enhance their position, the American Indian agents arranged to send a delegation of Potawatomi, Shawnee, Miami, Ottawa, and Chippewa, Ojibwa, from Wabash to Philadelphia, the nation's capital. 5 medals was one of the 2 Potawatomi chiefs to go. Sailing from Detroit, they arrived in Philadelphia, where President Washington honored them with a banquet.
You just said something.
What?
Sailing from Detroit to Philadelphia. That's just something I'm marking out. 1794, they're selling boats. And I wonder where did this boat go to get you from Detroit to Philadelphia?
Had to be Mississippi, right?
That's why I just pointed it out real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, but that is something that can be easily missed. Washington extolled the chiefs to honor the Greenville Treaty, which had been the result of a terrible war. He also called for all the tribes to take up agriculture. By 1800, 5 medals convinced Tapanabe that the poor winter hunts since 1796 could only be corrected if the tribe adopted agricultural methods. Tapanabe asked the Americans for assistance. In December 1801, another delegation went east, this time to Washington, the new capital. This delegation was led by Little Turtle of Miami. Stopping in Baltimore, 5 medals addressed a convention of Quakers asking for assistance in agriculture and in stopping the flow of whiskey. In Washington, 5 medals supported Little Turtle's call for annuity distributions of Fort Wayne instead of Detroit, which was more convenient to both nations. The villages further west in St. Joseph received little, if any, of the payment. Both leaders also joined Little Turtle's call for the suppression of the liquor trade. Whiskey was reaching the Potawatomi from the Wabash River trade. Governor Harrison moved to have the annuities paid at Fort Wayne, then called for a land session council at
You know what's funny?
Vincent. Huh?
We're hearing it heavy now. That's why I'm kind of glad that we're not skipping over these chiefs that signed on these things.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'm noticing, there's a problem with the alcohol.
Yeah, it's really
That
bad.
it seemed like that all these meetings when they got these chiefs together,
Mm-hmm.
that they served them alcohol and liquor and got them to sign these treaties and stuff once they got them intoxicated.
Yeah.
And not saying that that takes responsibility off of anybody, because you read the one chief, he wasn't even drinking, told his whole people don't even drink.
Right.
And because they wasn't at the time, even though they broke the deals, you can see what they was using to broker deals with.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. You can make this up or write it if you wanted to.
Yeah. So we got about another 16 minutes. So I'm gonna finish this up and then we're gonna close out.
Mm-hmm.
Tapanabi, Five Meadows, Makago, and Kisas came for the Panato Potawatomi.
I said so many different names. Can't pronounce the ones you do know how to say.
Look, I've been saying it. The land in question was well south of Kisas town, which was the furthest south of the Potawatomi village. When the treaty was completed in June 1803, the Potawatomi agreed to it. In 1807, William Kirk, a Quaker missionary, and Five Meadows met to arrange for an agricultural mission to his village. It never materialized. That year and the next 4 years, he, Minimac, and Tapanabi continued to ask the American government for agricultural help. The equipment that was sent was never used. William Kirk had been sent for the purpose of assisting the Indian people in learning to use these tools, but conflict with Little Turtle's son-in-law, William Wells, led Kirk to move to Wapakoneta, Ohio, to assist the Shawnee. Eventually, Thomas Jefferson withdrew his support for the Quaker Project. In September 1809, Governor Harrison met in council at Fort Wayne with the Winnemac, Five Meadows, and Kisas of the Potawatomi, and the Miami chiefs. When the Miami refused to negotiate land cessions, the Potawatomi held firm to the Miami as their allies, even as Winnemac worked to convince the Miami to sell their land. Because of the proximity of Americans' fort to Five Meadows Village, he remained friendly with the Americans, as did Kisas. He was concerned with Tecumseh because of the trouble that would follow. In spite of repeated entreaties, Five Meadows refused to listen to Tecumseh.
But check this out real quick. William Wells, 1770, August. It says also known as Apekonit, Apikononet. Carrot Top was the son-in-law of Chief Little Turtle of Miami. He fought for the Miami and the Northwest Indian War. During the course of the war, he became a United States Army officer and also served in the war 1812. But guess what's interesting about this dude?
What's that?
He was a white man who was born in Kentucky and lived among the Miami for 8 years after his capture in 1784. And got adopted by them. That's why he was his son-in-law. It's showing you again how people got in and submitted and took over.
Yeah.
And when I heard son-in-law, the son just told me to look him up real quick, and that's wow.
So, do. Whoo, boy.
He was adopted by a chief named, what is it, Gavia, Gavahate, Hate. Translated, it would be Chief Porcupine.
Wow.
His Indian name was Apikononet Carrot Top, in reference to his red hair. And that's what made me look him up when you said the redhead chief.
mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, he had his European family here living in Louisville and stuff, but he stayed, but he remained with the Miami perhaps because he had married a Wea woman and had a child. His wife and daughter were later captured in a raid by General James Wilkinson in 1791 and taken to Cincinnati. Meanwhile, under the command of the great Miami war chief Little Turtle, Wells led a group of Miami sharpshooters at the St. Clair's defeat in 1791.
And see, this is the reason why it's very important to know who you're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, there's always backdoor dealings and things of that nature happening.
Yep.
And when we're in a position, I'm talking present day we're, meaning the Indians, that we're in a position that we're in now, because we can sometimes be too trusting, specifically of individuals that look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be very careful. You know, the saying goes, all skin folk ain't kin folk.
Facts.
And what that means is, I'm going to look at your actions to determine how I deal with you.
Facts.
So, with what we're trying to accomplish as far as helping these tribes and being able to assist in them becoming self sustaining,
Mm-hmm.
we are being very careful and cautious with who we share information with, because what a person does with a little bit will definitely tell me what they do with a lot. And from
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing, individuals are basically squabbling and having arguments over a couple of $100 in YouTube funds. So if they're going to act crazy over a couple of $100 a week in YouTube money, what will they
Not even
do?
a week, a month.
So what would they do for a couple of $100,000? You know,
All the information that, like you said, the information that we use to help these tribes become self-sufficient. You know, we are not the guardians of this information. We're just trying to make sure that what happened in our history don't happen now. We have to make sure that we don't allow anyone to know our secrets, to know our ways. Because by studying this history, we see by being careless and being emotional, it allowed for some of this stuff to happen. We let our guard down. How many stories have we read so far about them bringing alcohol and whiskey and beer to tribes, getting them drunk, then getting them to sign deals?
and I can almost promise you that a lot of this alcoholism was started amongst the tribal chiefs or amongst the tribes,
Mm-hmm.
because just looking at how dishonest that the Europeans came off and how they were treating each other. And we knew how they was treating each other before they even came here. So let's not get that twisted.
Mm-hmm.
We knew about their history before they got here.
We were making deals against their history, knowing that they didn't like each other like that.
So it's not like we didn't know. We just thought we were special. And we thought we
Yeah.
were different.
You heard Joseph Brant. He was trying to work backdoor deals on everybody to get them fighting with each other, and it backfired on him in the end.
Yeah, you can't be more cunning and conniving than they are. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, we have to be very careful with who we're dealing with. That's the reason why
Yep.
my mentality is, who's gonna vouch for you? Because if
Mm-hmm.
we're helping tribes, you know, gain access to hundreds of thousands and potentially millions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
and we're doing it and not charging, and then this information get out to somebody who's money hungry and just in it for themselves. Not
What you think
only
gonna happen?
not only could they potentially overcharge somebody or charge them and not give them the correct information, but they could basically abuse what these tribes could have access to and cause it all to stop.
Yep. And we reading about that now through these stories.
So, so for anybody that is wondering why certain information is being withheld, that's the reason. Because you have to be proven. I have to trust you. And if I can't trust you, I'm not dealing with you. And just by watching your actions from afar and seeing how you act, I know I can't trust you. So at the end of the day, if you got a problem with me, come talk to me. But just trust and believe and know for 100% of a fact, you you gonna get asked some questions that you might not want to ask, because I'm looking at what you're doing. I'm seeing how you operate. I'm seeing how you maneuver. So just know, if you're gonna work with us,
We will ask you questions,
and you gotta have clean hands.
and we expect the answer to the question. Like we say, you can ask us any question. We have no problem answering it.
But just know you're gonna get some questions asked, and by not asking, you told me everything I need to know.
And by now, y'all know we are addressing the elephant in the room, the questions and conversations we're trying to avoid. Like I stated before, we're not here to make you feel good. We're here to point you in the direction of the info so we can do our job, tie back into our tribes and tie back into our land. And willing to face whatever the hard reality and truth is as we do this research and finding on who we
It says you're echoing a little bit. What's that?
are. All right. Let me see. It's coming out of echo on this other end real quick. Let me see. I can tell you. You don't have desktop capture on, do you?
No, I do not. Desktop capture is muted.
All right. Okay. Let me fix that on my end real quick.
Okay. So, like I was saying, at the end of the day, if I can't trust you, I'm not gonna work with you. And if I don't know you, and no one's gonna vouch for you, I'm not. I'm definitely not working with you. So, if you got a problem with me, you know how to reach me. But just
Mm-hmm.
know, trust, and believe you're gonna get asked questions, and we're gonna address some things. Now, there may be some things I don't know, and if those things are explained, then we can work together. But at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, I don't do he said, she said. I'll put this out here
No,
now. If you come to me with some information about somebody, you better be willing to say it in front of them. Because if you're not willing to say it in front of them,
I don't want to hear it.
then you're the problem. Period, point
Yep.
blank in discussion. Just know that. I'm gonna say it again. If you got something to say to me about somebody and you're not willing to say it in front of them, then you're the problem. And that's something that
Fact.
everybody should be thinking about. If someone's coming to you telling you about something that somebody said or they did, and they're not willing to say it in front of that person, they're the problem. Just know that to
That's
be
it.
true. Because
All you need an audience, all you need a live audience to entertain with it. No, like TMH was saying, that's one of our biggest problems. That we talk at each other more than we talk to each other. And we need improvement as a whole. Is that why do we accept, like you said, why would you accept somebody coming to you, telling you some drama, but can't tell you in front of the person that supposedly did it or said it? Then these same people turn around and complain, well, the colonizer falsely accusing. Ain't you falsely accusing? Two wrongs don't make a right here, relatives. We must do better.
so at the end of the day, I like to put my cards on the table and let people know where I stand. If you ever got a problem with me, you ever heard that I said something,
Ask. We ain't hard to find.
yeah, ask me. But this is one thing I'm gonna challenge you and I'm gonna dare you. The person that accused me, they better be willing to say it in front of me. Because if they ain't, then they got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or they scared one. Because that's one thing that's never gonna happen. I'm never gonna accuse somebody without them being present or without willing for them to be present and saying it in front of them.
Yep.
And if you're not willing to say it in front of somebody, then you're the problem.
Bingo.
So
There's no way around that. Like I said, we got to do better as a whole. We have to become accountable for our actions and our people actions. Like we said prior last week, wrong is wrong. And if you're not willing to call out the wrong and speak on the wrong and just sit there and watch it and let it play out, guess what? You're just as guilty.
yeah, because you're allowing it to happen.
Yep.
From my standpoint, I understand about unity.
Mm-hmm.
Unity is a great thing, but don't get quiet when I ask you the question who you uniting with. Because if you want
Let's.
unity, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
tell me who you uniting with, then I don't know. I don't know anything about the people that you unite with. That means you're the problem.
Mm-hmm. And let's look at unity. Before you can have unity, you must be a complete unit first. You get what I'm saying? What comes before unity? The unit comes before you add the Y to it, don't it?
Yeah, last time I checked.
So that means you would have to be a complete, functioning, effective unit before you can have unity. And how can you have unity when people keep pushing the same BS that got us in these situations now? It ain't nothing but cycles being repeated, 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 and it's gonna keep repeating until we stop it.
So, at the end of the day, if you're dealing with people who are known and proven scammers, taking people's money and not delivering the product, don't come see me. Do not
Don't,
come
please
see me
don't.
because I'm gonna ask you straight up: are you still dealing with that person? And
Mm-hmm.
if the answer is not no, and you
Can't
hemming and
help you.
hawing, and you scared not to say something, then you're the
I can't
problem.
help you.
You're
I
the problem.
cannot help you.
So just know that to be true. So if you're dealing with known scammers and you're dealing with people who's known to take people money and not deliver product, please don't come talk to me.
It's time to put an end to it. It's time for us as a community to start policing our own. If we know that there's crooks and scammers in our community, then as a whole, we run them out. That's the only way. Just because somebody look like you don't mean that's you. And again, that's the importance of genealogy, lineage, tying back to your tribe, tying back to your land, so you can know who you are. Because if not, you just guessing. And on that note, any closing remarks? No sellout of TMH?
Look, the only thing I'm gonna say, like always, do your family tree, do your genealogy, stay away from the DNA test because it's for entertainment purposes only.
Mm-hmm.
Find your tribe, attach to your tribe. Know that there's over 573 federally recognized tribes and
Mm-hmm.
close to 1,000 locally state recognized tribes. So you have
Yeah,
no
we
excuse.
posted what the first 500. I think it was Saturday or Sunday of the state, and we
Yeah.
already got the federal one. So the second half should be launched today or tomorrow.
So there is no excuse. Don't sit here and tell me that you can't find your tribe when there's over 1,000 state recognized tribes and then over
Mm-hmm.
500 federally recognized tribes. So you basically talking about close to 1,500 tribes. You can't find one
Mm-hmm.
out of 1,500. Okay. Once you find your tribe, let us know and we'll help you and your tribe. And
Facts.
if you doubt us, try us. That's all I got. I relinquish the mic.
Any closing remarks from you, no sellout?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
All day. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're trying to talk or you were talking in the thing. Sound like you're kind of preoccupied. But on that note, same thing. Find your tribe and we'll help your tribe. That is why a Tonkinist Assembly is here. To upraise American Indian voices, to help the Indian and the tribes become self-sufficient. And on that note, it has always been fun with the relatives. Until the next rising, peace.